My childhood friend Julia Bailey is pregnant. She came to me crying, hoping I would step up and take responsibility. As I watched her tear-stained face, my heart softened, and I was about to agree. Suddenly, a series of comments flashed above my head like subtitles on a screen. Poor supporting character. Don't acknowledge it. She wants you to take the fall, not only to help her raise a child with a poor student but also to get rid of you. Ah, here comes the classic scene. If the supporting character accepts, our main character can pretend to be his child and become the long-lost heir of a secret billionaire, inheriting billions and enjoying the luxuries of high society. Go for it, main character. I lowered my gaze, realizing that I was merely a supporting character in this story. Ding! Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. Year 13, with less than 2 months until A-levels, the academic pressure was mounting. Our head teacher, with a grim face, repeated daily, "This is the final sprint, a crucial moment. We must not relax." I spent my days solving practice questions and taking mock exams, leaving no time for anything else. Recently, Julia Bailey, the girl next door who had grown up with me, had been acting strangely. She had become close to Jake Johnson, a transfer student from a disadvantaged background. They were seen together almost constantly, sparking gossip among our peers. During breaks from our monotonous studies, classmates' gazes would often linger on Julia and Jake as they came and went together. Some of my friends even asked me about it. "Lyle, you and Julia grew up together. We thought she might fancy you." I was quick to reprimand them sternly. "Don't talk nonsense. It's not right to gossip about girls behind their backs." My friends laughed, calling me boring and old-fashioned. I couldn't blame them for asking. Previously, Julia and I had always walked to and from school together. By the time school finished each day, it was already dark. Julia's mom had once said to me, "Lyle, we're too busy with work. Julia's a young girl, and it's not safe for her to walk alone at night. Could you look after her and walk home together after school?" I had nodded in agreement. Aside from growing up together just at the end of last year, Julia had shyly handed me a love letter, expressing her affectionate feelings for me, so I felt responsible for escorting her home safely. The conflict between us began in early spring this year. That day, as usual after the final bell, I waited for her at the school gates. We were in the same class, but after waiting for half an hour, she still hadn't appeared. I was getting impatient. I thought about going back into school to look for her, but worried she might arrive at the gates just as I left. So I kept waiting. I waited until all the other students had left the school. The security guard asked me 3 times if I needed help. I shook my head each time, not knowing what to say. Everyone knew that students were strictly forbidden from dating, and parents viewed teenage relationships as a serious threat. I was born out of wedlock, my father unknown. My mother's health had deteriorated after giving birth to me. As a child, I often overheard neighbors gossiping about my mom. Some even insulted her to her face. When I was 10, she passed away from depression. I lived with my grandparents and matured early, so I understood the importance of a girl's reputation. I had always been cautious about creating any rumors between Julia and me that might embarrass her. That's why, even when walking her home, I was extremely careful, always waiting for her at the school gates. That night, I waited until almost midnight when my grandmother called, worried about me. I had no choice but to go back into school to look for her. But the classrooms were already locked. I even ran to the girls' toilets, not caring about propriety, and went straight in. I searched every possible place I could think of. I was extremely worried. When I got home, I went to Julia's house first, knocking on the door for ages before Mrs. Bailey finally came to answer, yawning. "Lyle, what's the matter at this hour?" Mrs. Bailey asked. Anxiously, I said, "Mrs. Bailey, is Julia home? I've been waiting for her at the school gates, but I didn't see her at all." Mrs. Bailey looked at me strangely, frowning as she said, "Julia came home early. She's been asleep for hours. Lyle, you should go home and get some rest too." With that, Mrs. Bailey closed the door. I stood there in the cold spring night, confused and at a loss. I had spent the whole evening calling and messaging Julia. I had been worried sick about her, anxious and uneasy, but she had been home all along? The next morning, I waited for her at the corner on the way to school and stopped her to ask. "You mean yesterday?" Julia Bailey said with a grin. "Lyle, how long did you wait for me yesterday?" "Until about midnight," I answered honestly. "I looked everywhere for you. I even went into the girls' toilet." Julia doubled over with laughter, clapping her hands repeatedly. I didn't understand what was so funny about it. "You went home alone. Why didn't you tell me?" My tone couldn't help but carry a hint of reproach. Julia said with a smile, "Lyle, yesterday I made a bet with Jake to see how long you would wait. He said you'd wait for me for half an hour at most. But I knew you'd definitely wait until after 11 p.m., and sure enough, I won." As she said this, she held her head high, like a proud peacock, but there were a few suspicious red marks on her neck. I was quite angry, thinking that just because of her bet with Jake Johnson, I had stood like an idiot in the cold wind waiting for her for more than 2 hours. "Julia, did you just want to make a fool of me?" I said with a frown. Perhaps because of my unfriendly tone, Julia was stunned for a moment, then pouted and said, "I didn't ask you to wait for me. If you don't wait for me, there are plenty of others who would." I opened my mouth, wanting to say that it wasn't safe for a girl to walk alone at night. "Don't wait for me anymore. I'm dating Jake now." At this moment, Jake Johnson had already walked over, pushing his bicycle. He handed the breakfast hanging on the bicycle handlebars to Julia, saying with a full smile, "Julia, I made the porridge myself. Eat it quickly." I turned to leave, but Jake stopped me. "Lyle, Julia and I are dating now. I hope you'll be sensible and stop hanging around my Julia. A male homewrecker is still a homewrecker, all equally disgusting and lowly." "Oh, I suppose being a homewrecker is hereditary? After all, your mum tried to be one, wanting to climb up the social ladder by sleeping around. But she didn't succeed, did she? You're still a bastard." In a fit of anger, I swung my fist at his face. In my life, what I hate most is when people bring up my mum. In the end, not only did Julia shield Jake, but she also twisted the facts in front of the head teacher. Fortunately, I had always been a good student, consistently ranking in the top 10 in the school, so the head teacher just made me write a self-criticism, and the matter was over. Afterwards, the head teacher had a chat with me. "Lyle, I know you and Julia grew up together, and now that she's fallen for someone else, you're upset. But you can't hit people. Moreover, it's the final sprint for A-levels now. Focus on your studies and do well in the exams. Wait until university to think about dating." I nodded without further explanation. From then on, Julia and I became strangers. She and Jake openly kissed in the classroom, and during a heavy rainstorm, they rushed into the rain curtain regardless of the ongoing class, screaming, laughing, and falling to the ground in each other's arms. Amidst the dull and heavy studying, their romance was the talk of many, like a bright rainbow after the rain, dazzling and eye-catching. It was late April, less than 2 months away from the A-level exams. On that day, as I was about to reach home, Julia Bailey stopped me in my tracks. "What is it?" I asked with a frown. "Lyle." Julia reached out and tugged at my sleeve. I frowned slightly and stepped back, but she dropped a bombshell. "Lyle, I'm pregnant." I stumbled in shock. Good heavens, we were only in 6th form, and she was pregnant? I had originally thought she was just getting close to Jake Johnson, maybe dating a bit. I never in my wildest dreams imagined they would be so bold as to engage in such intimate activities. And worse still, they didn't even use protection. "Lyle, you'll help me, right?" Julia lowered her head, a glint of cunning in her eyes quickly replaced by a look of pitiful innocence. I thought for a moment and hurriedly said, "Julia, there's only a month left until the A-levels, but there's still time. Go home and tell your mum. Quickly go to the hospital and terminate the pregnancy. Rest for a few days, then focus on your exams. Lyle, I want to keep the baby. You?" You'll help me, won't you? If my mum finds out about this, she'll kill me for sure. But my mum has always liked you. If she knows the baby is yours, she'll definitely accept it." As she spoke, Julia raised her tear-stained face. Looking at her in that state, I felt my heart soften. I thought, maybe I should go talk to her mum, explain everything, and have Mrs. Bailey take her to the hospital to terminate the pregnancy. But before I could speak, I saw a series of comments flashing above my head. "Pat, Pat," the supporting male character. "Don't soften up. Don't admit to anything. Otherwise, you'll never be able to explain yourself in the future. She's just trying to get you to take responsibility, not only helping her raise a child with a poor student but also plotting to kill you." The classic scene has arrived. As long as the supporting male character admits to it, our main character can pretend to be the supporting character's child, becoming the lost child of a hidden wealthy family, inheriting billions in assets, enjoying the luxuries of a wealthy family. Go for it, main character. The concept of a hidden wealthy family was too far-fetched for me, but I knew one thing. I couldn't take responsibility for this. So, I shook off Julia's hand and said, "Miss Bailey, whoever got you pregnant, you should go to them. You told me a while ago not to bother you anymore. Please don't bother me either. I still have 2 practice papers to finish tonight. I don't have time for this." With that, I walked away. As I glanced around, I caught sight of a male figure around the corner. How despicable, getting a girl pregnant and trying to make me take responsibility, raise their child, face the wrath of Mrs. Bailey, as well as the pressure from school gossip. And they even want to get rid of me to take my place? To be honest, I don't know what Julia Bailey and Jake Johnson are planning. I also don't know how killing me would allow him to take my place. Can a hidden wealthy family really accept a son without DNA verification? B-levels are the watershed moment in life. See whether one can pave a bright path for their future depends on this crucial step. According to the comments online, if I don't die, I can just coast through life. But I don't have any warm feelings towards that hidden wealthy father. After all, if it weren't for him abandoning my beautiful mother, she wouldn't have succumbed to depression at such a young age. Growing up, many people insulted me, calling me a bastard, a mongrel, a little beast. Since I was young, I've been exceptionally handsome. In an ordinary family, having a good-looking child would be a source of pride. But for me, my appearance became a burden, especially as a boy. Many people would point and stare at me. Therefore, if it weren't for the online comments reminding me, I think I would have been very sympathetic to Julia Bailey's situation. I might have even stepped up to be her knight in shining armor, even if it meant being cheated on. I originally thought that after rejecting Julia Bailey, the matter would end there. I would focus on my studies, and she could continue her relationship with Jake Johnson. As for the baby, she could decide whether to keep it or not. Unexpectedly, while I was studying at home that evening, Mrs. Bailey started banging on our door. My grandmother opened it. Mrs. Bailey was holding a kitchen knife, her face red with anger, saying she wanted to kill me. "Lyle Brown, you little beast. Come out here." Mr. Bailey also came along, spewing vulgarities. When my grandmother asked what was happening, Mr. Bailey shoved her hard. My grandmother, being elderly, lost her balance and stumbled backwards, falling to the ground. I rushed over to help her up. "Mrs. Bailey, what's going on?" I asked sternly. "You're breaking into my home with a weapon. I'll have to call the police." "Call the police?" Mrs. Bailey exploded, shouting, "You worthless bastard, born without a mother's care. You got my daughter pregnant, and now you're not taking responsibility." I truly didn't expect that after I rejected Julia Bailey, she would still pin this on me. "Mrs. Bailey, can a girl get pregnant just from talking to someone?" I said coldly. "With modern medicine, why don't we call the police first, and then, under their supervision, we can do a DNA test to see whose child your daughter is carrying." "Mrs. Bailey, I respect you as an elder, but you can't just ruin someone's reputation without proof, can you?" Mr. Bailey lunged forward to hit me, shouting all sorts of insults. He asked, If it's not yours, whose could it be? You think everyone is as shameless as you. Your mother was just as shameless back then, crawling into a rich man's bed, hoping to climb the social ladder with a child. What a cheap woman. I clenched my fists, barely restraining myself from hitting him. So what does that make your daughter now? Doing such a shameless thing? I said coldly, getting pregnant by someone else and trying to pin it on me? With that, I picked up my phone and called the police. When the police heard that someone had broken into a home with a knife and nearly injured a septuagenarian, they rushed over immediately. Seeing the police arrive, Mr. and Mrs. Bailey remained unafraid, insisting that I had gotten their daughter pregnant and should take responsibility. Officers, I've said before that we can do an amniocentesis to check the fetal DNA and see if the child is mine, I said firmly, even at the police station. The experienced officers observed our expressions and could tell I wasn't lying. Therefore, they suggested that since I insisted, we should have Julia Bailey come in for a DNA test. However, Julia Bailey lost her nerve. After arriving at the police station, she kept her head down and remained silent. Julia, you need to tell your parents clearly whose child you're carrying. Don't pin this on me, I said. Julia looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. After a long moment, she finally sobbed, Lyle, can't you help me out? Julia, is this something I can help with? I couldn't help but raise my voice. Is this like helping you with homework, doing your chores, or passing you answers during an exam? The police began to mediate. I was willing to overlook Mr. and Mrs. Bailey barging into my house with knives. However, the child in Julia's womb was a matter for the Bailey family and had nothing to do with me. I said that if Mr. and Mrs. Bailey would write a guarantee to stop bothering me in the future, that would be enough. I had no relationship with Julia whatsoever. An experienced older policeman thought for a moment, then called me outside and asked, Lyle, give me an honest answer. Is the child in that girl's womb really not yours? It really isn't, I said firmly. If the girl isn't seeking responsibility from the child's father, why is she involving you? The old policeman frowned. Do you know who the father is? I think I do, I said. Julia and I are neighbors. We've been close since childhood, but we've never dated, I explained. She recently got involved with a new transfer student at our school. I even had a conflict with him. Everyone at school knows about it. The old policeman nodded, then went back inside to question Julia about who the child's father was. Above my head, a series of comments flashed by. What's going on? Why didn't the supporting male character claim the child? Yeah. Why did it escalate to calling the police? Oh my days. How will this supporting female character survive? This supporting female character isn't a good person either. Later, she uses this child to bully our dear female lead. The supporting female character keeps manipulating the male lead because she knows his identity. She deserves to be punished. But don't you think the supporting male character is pitiful? He ended up being the fall guy, protecting the supporting female character, only to have his family killed and his identity stolen by the male lead. This comment was quickly buried by others. Everyone was calling out, wondering when the female lead would appear. I, however, felt a chill run down my spine as I suddenly remembered that Jake Johnson's features were somewhat similar to mine. After the A-levels, I would go to university in another city. After a year or two, my appearance would gradually blur in the minds of the neighbors. If Jake wanted to assume my identity, he would only need the Bailey family as witnesses. As for me, my grandparents would die. The comments never mentioned how I would die, but cold sweat broke out on my back. If what the comments said was true, my grandparents and I were just NPCs in a novel. Could I escape this ill fate? After returning home, I once again thought this matter was over. From now on, I just needed to be more cautious, protecting myself and my grandparents. I specifically warned my grandparents that Julia Bailey had become quite cunning and scheming lately, telling them to be more vigilant in the future. But what I didn't expect was that Mr. and Mrs. Bailey, who usually seemed decent, would become so shameless about this matter. 3 days later, on Sunday, Year 13 students only had one day off instead of the usual weekend break. While I was doing practice questions at home, Mrs. Bailey knocked on our door. At that time, my grandmother wasn't home. She used to be a secondary school teacher and had been hired by an education agency after retirement to work as a tutor. My grandfather happened to be in. Seeing Mrs. Bailey carrying some cheap fruits and bringing Julia Bailey to our door, he invited them in, considering they were neighbors. Julia Bailey, as always, sweetly called out, "Hello, Grandpa." My grandfather frowned slightly and asked, "What brings you here?" Mrs. Bailey smiled and said, "Mr. Brown, I'm here today to discuss the relationship between our two children. You see, your Lyle and my Julia have grown up together, childhood sweethearts. I only have this one daughter, raised with utmost care since she was little. If Lyle marries Julia, I won't mistreat him. Besides, you and your wife are getting on in years. What if something happens to you both in the future? How will Lyle manage all alone?" Hearing this, I was almost furious. Was she cursing my grandparents? Looking up, I saw my grandfather's face had darkened considerably. I spoke up directly. "Mrs. Bailey, are you having pipe dreams?" My grandfather, with a cold face, scolded, "Mrs. Bailey, whoever got your daughter pregnant, go find them. Don't bother my Lyle. Get out." I said sternly, "Mrs. Bailey, if you keep making trouble, I'll have to call the police again." Seeing my firm attitude, Mrs. Bailey angrily rebuked, "Lyle Brown, all these years of kindness have been wasted on you, you ungrateful bastard. You're just a nobody. Letting you marry Julia is doing you a favor. Don't be so ungrateful. Mrs. Bailey, respect is earned, not given. Your family might have no shame, but I do," I said directly. "Your daughter might be confused, but are you confused too? Julia has always had good grades. She has a solid foundation. Being deceived by that good-for-nothing, you should set things right. Get rid of that mistake quickly, let her recover, and take the A-levels," I said seriously. I really couldn't understand what kind of nonsense Julia Bailey had fed her parents. In fact, the most sensible thing for Julia Bailey to do would be to quietly terminate the pregnancy. Focus on her studies, rather than causing such a public spectacle. Although I hadn't said a word to others, I couldn't stop Mr. and Mrs. Bailey from coming to my house to make a scene, making such a fuss that I had to call the police. Now, all the neighbors know that the Bailey girl, still in 6th form, got pregnant by someone and is trying to pin it on the neighbor boy. There are also many chaotic rumors at school. Mrs. Bailey's face alternated between flushing and paling. I looked at Julia Bailey, shook my head, and said, "Julia, if you want to keep the baby, you should ask Jake Johnson to take responsibility. Clinging to me like this is useless." Julia Bailey stomped her foot, covered her face, and ran away. Mrs. Bailey cursed viciously, seemingly berating me for not knowing my place and daring to reject her daughter. Or perhaps she was cursing Julia Bailey for being useless, incompetent, and misbehaving. As the A-levels drew nearer, our head teacher's face grew grimmer by the day, constantly harping on about studying. Our days were filled with practice papers, teachers explaining key points, or giving tips on how to tackle certain types of questions. In our spare moments, some would gossip about Julia Bailey and Jake Johnson. My desk mate was quite the busybody. During break, he leaned in and whispered, "Lyle, have you really never touched Julia Bailey?" I frowned slightly, put off by his disrespectful tone. His contempt and disdain for Julia Bailey was palpable. "No," I said directly. "We're still young. We should focus on our studies." My desk mate burst out laughing. "You're such a bookworm, Lyle. All you know is studying. She was practically offering herself to you, and you turned her down. If I'd known Julia was so easy, I would have made a move. Too bad someone else got there first. Not only popping her cherry, but knocking her up too." His words were not only careless but peppered with vulgar slang. I don't know where he picked up such language, but I frowned and said, "She's a girl. Show some respect." My desk mate shrugged, unconcerned. Of course, this was all other people's business. Julia Bailey had been openly dating Jake Johnson, making no secret of it to everyone. Even after getting pregnant, she made no attempt to hide it, twice coming to make a scene with me. I really couldn't understand why she was bothering me. What did any of this have to do with me? In the afternoon, Jake Johnson, the instigator of all this, who usually kept a low profile, allowing Julia Bailey to run wild, showed up. He'd been hiding in the background, like a coward. Not only that, he occasionally boasted to other boys about Julia Bailey's bedroom antics, mocking and laughing at her expense. To be honest, I despised him. As a boy, if you like a girl, you should protect her, not mock and humiliate her, speaking of her so carelessly. What do you want? I asked, my tone unfriendly. Marry Julia Bailey, he said coldly, with the superior attitude of someone giving orders. Why should I? I scoffed. Jake Johnson, who do you think you are? Lyle, this is your destiny, Jake Johnson said. You must marry her or else dash. Or else what? I laughed coldly. Jake Johnson, you're really pathetic. You get a girl pregnant and expect me to marry her. I'd really like to know what's going on in that head of yours. With that, I prepared to leave. I was afraid if I talked to him any longer, I wouldn't be able to resist punching him again. Lyle, you must marry her. Jake Johnson stepped in front of me, blocking my path once more. No matter how you try to avoid it, this is your only value. He pressed on aggressively. You're disrupting the plot progression by dragging this out. Punch. I clenched my fist and swung hard at his face. Last time I lacked experience, but this time I aimed straight for his nose. Since I was often told I looked like a girl due to my pretty face, I had deliberately learned taekwondo and boxing. In a fight, a pansy like Jake Johnson was no match for me. But with people coming and going in the school, everyone rushed to pull us apart. Jake Johnson's face was covered in blood, and he was hurriedly sent to the school infirmary. The head teacher called me to the office once again. I took out the voice recorder hidden in my school uniform and handed it to the head teacher. Sir, you're an adult. Listen to this. Is this how people should talk? I know fighting was wrong, but the school strictly forbids dating. Jake Johnson and Julia Bailey's relationship is their own business. He got a girl pregnant, doesn't want to take responsibility, so he makes her come bother me once, twice. That's not all. He comes to harass me himself. I won't hit a girl, but can't I hit him? The head teacher is a good person. She comforted me and told me to focus on my studies and not worry. According to her, this kind of incident should be downplayed and forgotten. She would talk to Jake Johnson and settle the matter. The A-levels are the top priority. Those were her exact words. She also said that for a 17 or 18-year-old boy, it's normal to throw a punch in a fit of anger due to raging hormones. However, she advised me not to be so reckless in the future. I don't want to be reckless, but I really couldn't stand Jake's tone. As I left the head teacher's office, the Twitter comments were flooding in. Blimey, is this following the standard plot? Will our Lyle see through the schemer's plan, break through, get into Oxford, and secure his future? What about our main character who crossed over? Won't the main character be punished if he can't complete his mission? How do we save our main character? I'd pay 100 quid to get rid of the supporting character. Oi, watch it. Your moral compass is off. The main character is stealing the supporting character's identity, status, and research achievements. Yeah, he's just a parasite. I'd rather watch the supporting character's journey, even if it's a bit dull, than see the main character steal someone else's identity and success. The comments were divided into two factions, arguing fiercely, but they made me realize that there was another path for my life, to be my own main character. As for Jake Johnson, he's someone who has crossed over. He has the script and knows the plot. The small bit of information the comments spoiled for me was that the child in Julia Bailey's womb is crucial. As long as I don't acknowledge it, Jake can't carry out his plan. But Jake is Jake, and he came up with a vicious move. That night, he persuaded Julia to climb to the school roof, threatening to jump. She held a megaphone, crying and wailing at me. Lyle Brown, we've been childhood sweethearts. You coaxed me into dating, into sleeping with you. Now I'm pregnant, and you won't take responsibility? The firefighters came, the police came, and the school's teachers and students all came. It was the same police officers who had dealt with us when I called last time. Hearing this, they all exchanged glances. The experienced senior officer approached me again, his face stern, and asked, "Lyle, you need to be responsible for what you say. Is the child in that girl's womb really not yours?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. Pointing at the school building, I said, "I've said before, we can do an amniocentesis DNA test. If it's mine, I'll jump from up there." I handed the evidence I had collected from the paparazzi to the senior officer and said, "She's caused trouble for me several times, so this is the evidence I've gathered. Officer, I lost my mum when I was young, and my grandparents raised me with great difficulty. The A-levels are just around the corner. I hope you can handle this fairly and not let it affect my exams. Also, I hope that man who can't control his lower half, who acted on impulse and came up with this vicious plan, will receive the appropriate punishment." The evidence I presented was proof of Jake and Julia checking into a hotel together. The comments kept saying that I must acknowledge this child so that Jake could impersonate me in the future. This step was crucial. So, I collected evidence of Jake and Julia checking into a hotel and gave it to the police at the right time, shattering Jake's plan to impersonate me. No matter how desperate Julia Bailey felt, she would never actually jump off the roof to commit suicide. Eventually, with the persuasion of the police, school teachers, and onlookers, she came down from the rooftop with a tear-stained face. This time, I insisted on a paternity test. After all, Julia's behavior had seriously affected my studies. I emphasized to the police, "Officer, this is a crucial time for A-levels. Given that Julia's actions had disturbed public order and affected social morality, at my strong request, they performed amniocentesis for both my potential paternity and Jake Johnson's." 2 days later, the police announced the results. The fetus in Julia's womb was Jake Johnson's biological child, unrelated to me. During these 2 days, the school staff had multiple meetings. Under pressure from public opinion and some parents, they eventually expelled both Julia and Jake. However, being compassionate, the teachers retained their eligibility for A-levels. Our head teacher, being particularly kind-hearted, called Julia to the office and earnestly advised her, "Go home, study hard, and focus on your A-levels. You have a good foundation. If you give it your all, there's still hope. There's no future without education. As for the baby, it's still early, you should terminate the pregnancy." The head teacher said the same things to Julia's parents. Anyone who wished Julia well wouldn't advise her to have the baby at this time. After all, bringing a new life into this world requires parents to take on significant responsibilities. However, the head teacher's words fell on deaf ears. Julia simply wouldn't listen. Jake Johnson intercepted me at the school gate once again. "Lyle, why can't you just cooperate?" he said aggressively. "What was the point of making a fuss and doing a paternity test? You think that changes anything? You're destined to be a side character." Before I could respond, a series of captions flashed above my head. "Panicking, panicking. The story intruder is panicking. Story intruder. Don't you know there's still another plot twist? You might not become the protagonist after all." I smiled and calmly said, "Jake, do you know that your current panicked state makes you look like a cornered rat? How dare you insult me?" Jake was furious. I laughed, looking at his bandaged nose, and said, "Not only do I dare to insult you, but I also dare to hit you. If you keep getting in my way and nattering on, I'll hit you again. After all, you're not even a student at our school anymore. I won't feel bad about hitting you." Jake angrily retorted, "You just wait and see." 3 days later, as I was returning home from school, I noticed an old electric scooter parked in front of my house. Someone had run a wire from the nearby electrical box to charge it. My heart sank as I thought, this isn't good. I took a photo with my phone and sent a message to the property management. Then, I immediately called my grandparents and told them we needed to go out. Although they were confused, I simply told them there was a problem with the scooter. My grandparents suggested we should call the security guards to handle it, but unfortunately, while they were usually around during the day, their phones were often unattended at night. Grandpa, Grandma, we'd better be careful, I said. The neighbors have gone mad recently, with all that pregnancy and jumping off buildings business. In the past, my grandparents might have hesitated at such a statement. But after Julia Bailey's suicide attempt, they were on high alert. So we left and checked into a small hotel nearby. I then called the police, reporting that someone had deliberately left a dangerous old electric scooter in front of our door, illegally connecting it to the power supply. The police didn't seem too concerned, as it's quite common to see electric scooters being charged in hallways in many neighborhoods. They just made a note of my call. However, as I had anticipated, a violent explosion rocked our neighborhood around 1 a.m., with flames shooting into the sky. Firefighters, security guards, and police all rushed to the scene. Thanks to the prompt response of the fire brigade, the damage wasn't too extensive. The Bailey family suffered the worst losses. The fire and gas explosion left Julia severely burned, and she inevitably lost her baby. Mr. and Mrs. Bailey's flat was also badly damaged. Although our flat was directly opposite, we had turned off the gas and electricity before leaving, so our losses were minimal. As I had previously reported the incident, the police called me in for questioning. I told them straightforwardly, "Officer, you know that Julia Bailey and Jake Johnson were dating and she got pregnant. I don't know what came over them, but they tried to force me to take responsibility for it. When I refused, Julia threatened to jump off a building, and Jake said he'd kill me. That electric scooter looked suspicious from the start. I contacted the property management and the police as soon as I saw it. All of this was on record, of course. The police only questioned me as a formality. Their investigation revealed that Jake Johnson had not only tampered with the old electric scooter, but had also purchased homemade explosives. He couldn't escape the charge of arson. Surprisingly, Julia Bailey turned out to be an accomplice. Neither of them had even bothered to avoid the CCTV cameras at the estate entrance. I couldn't fathom how such stupid and wicked people could ever be considered protagonists. By the time I finished my A-levels, the arson case had been concluded. Jake Johnson was sentenced to 8 years in prison for malicious arson resulting in severe injury and significant property damage. Julia Bailey, as an accomplice, was sentenced to 1.5 years. However, due to her severe burns and the loss of her baby, her sentence was suspended. After his sentencing, Jake went into a frenzy, shouting, "It's impossible! It's impossible! I'm the main character. I'm the one who traveled through time. I have the script. Why did this happen? Lyle Brown, come out." Then he started spewing vulgar local slang, cursing various body parts. It was truly offensive. He kept causing a commotion in prison, demanding to see me. The police had no choice but to contact me. I agreed to meet him. Separated by a glass partition, I picked up the receiver. Seeing me, he became agitated and lunged towards me. I pointed at the receiver on his side. "Lyle, why couldn't you just cooperate? Was it so hard to accept Julia's baby?" He ranted. "Why aren't you dead? Your existence is just to fulfill my destiny." I couldn't understand how someone so stupid could have traveled through time or completed any mission. I sneered. "Why should I? Just because you're a time traveler who's both stupid and evil, who doesn't strive for self-improvement and tries to climb the social ladder by getting a girl pregnant." Hearing this, Jake's jaw dropped, and he stared at me in shock. How did you know? Isn't it obvious?" I scoffed. "You're so full of yourself, thinking you have the script, looking down on all of us, spouting nonsense and acting like a lunatic every day. To me, you're nothing but a madman. Next time you travel through time, remember to bring your brain with you." With that, I hung up the receiver. On the day the A-level results came out, something unexpected happened. I had performed exceptionally well and ended up being the top scorer in the county. At the graduation ceremony, I was interviewed by reporters as the school's representative. However, what I didn't anticipate was that this interview would prematurely attract the attention of my so-called reclusive wealthy father. My life suddenly took on a surreal quality. The long-lost son of a wealthy family, with refined features and an aristocratic air. These were the terms suddenly being applied to me. Add to that the halo of being the top A-level scorer, and my Twitter followers skyrocketed, pushing me to the top of the trending list. Many past events were dug up again, becoming topics of public fascination. Just as my old father was preparing to take me to London, Julia Bailey appeared, dragging her lame leg, her body covered in horrific burn scars. Astonishingly, even at this point, she still demanded that I marry her. "Lyle, you moved the electric scooter that day, didn't you?" she said. "You installed the explosives in my house? Otherwise, why was it my house that exploded and not yours?" I remained silent, smiling. Really, playing with electric scooter fires and small explosives against a science genius? I had indeed moved the electric scooter and recalculated the blast position, taking into account the location of the Bailey's gas pipes and other factors. In fact, modern houses with their concrete and steel reinforcements are not easy to set on fire. But they can't withstand deliberate sabotage. "What if I report you? What will you do then?" Julia Bailey raised her chin, looking down at me haughtily. I smiled and said, "Julia, I don't understand what you're talking about." With that, I turned and walked away. I wasn't concerned about her baseless accusations. But I never expected that Julia Bailey would die in a car accident that very night. Due to the fire, Mr. and Mrs. Bailey's house was burned down. They still had over £30,000 left on their mortgage and faced compensation claims from their neighbors. People in the neighborhood would spit and curse whenever they saw anyone from their family. As a result, after Julia's death, her body was left unclaimed at the police station for a long time, as her parents were unwilling to collect it. Epilogue. After Julia Bailey's death, the comment section appeared one last time. "Ooh, so Lyle finally gets his chance. I knew it. Jake's storyline was too disgusting. If the author had gone with Jake's storyline, I would have dropped the book. Go Lyle. Research new energy sources and lead our country to greatness." I smiled and thanked the commenters. I knew that my future was still uncertain, but at least I was no longer anyone's supporting character. I would study hard, take good care of my grandparents, and hope for their long and healthy lives.